Welcome to Open Tech Convo. This is Serin Omar Lowe, your host. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Adrian McKinman, strategic leadership trainer and international sports psychologist, who has 7 university qualifications, trained people in more than 136 organizations in 29 countries, has a black belt in 3 styles of Kung Fu, and was an instructor of batons and handcuffs. Our topic today is about increasing mental toughness, concentration, and TRIPE in the workplace. So, Adrian, let's get straight into it. What is mental toughness?
It's all about performing at a high level regularly, regardless of the situation. It's a personality style, and that means that anybody can be placed on a continuum from low to high. People at the low end of the continuum are labeled mentally sensitive. People at the high end are labeled mentally tough. And there's 4 parts to mental toughness. And they all conveniently start with the letter C: challenge, commitment, control, and confidence. The first part, challenge, refers to the degree to which you see situations as a fantastic opportunity opposed to a threat. The second part, commitment, refers to the degree to which you are committed to your goals. The third part, control, refers to the degree to which you feel in control versus not feeling in control. And then finally, the fourth part, confidence, refers to the degree to which you believe you can do what needs to be done. And so what you'll find is there's a huge difference between mentally tough and mentally sensitive people. Mentally tough people see situations as fantastic opportunity. They're highly committed to their goals. They feel in control. And finally, they have a large amount of confidence. The mentally sensitive are completely opposite. They see situations as a threat, not as a great challenge. They are easily end up stopping their goals. They don't have that commitment to them. They do not feel they're in control. And then finally, they don't have confidence.
Interesting. So, why is mental toughness important in business?
Well, okay, so think of the 2 ends of the continuum. The individuals who are mentally sensitive, they are indecisive, they're non-committed, they don't handle situations well, they fall apart. But your mentally tough people, well, they're highly motivated, they stay calm, they stay in control. And so it's not even remotely surprising that research shows that individuals who are mentally tough end up performing way better than people who are mentally sensitive. So what we're saying is, in a nutshell, mentally tough individuals do what needs to be done time after time after time. And there's one other cool thing about being mentally tough. People who are mentally tough tend to be relaxed and they tend to be friendly. And so that is a lovely attribute they have that people love. It's so much easier for your boss and fellow colleagues to get on with you when you are mentally tough.
Okay, interesting. So, what is the connection between mental toughness and concentration then?
Oh, you've got some cool questions. Okay, one of the things that you'll find is it's a very positive relationship. And so what you'll find is mentally tough people, they're calm, they're in control. And so their headspace is ideal. They've got lots of energy that's ideal for them to be able to zero in, focus on what they need to do. But the mentally sensitive people, they are the complete opposite. They're not in control. They don't feel calm. They certainly don't look calm. And their mental energy, their mental space is not ideal. And as a result, it is not impossible, but it's very difficult to be able to concentrate.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So in the workplace, how do you think an employer can increase mental toughness in the workforce?
Okay, well, once again, that's quite a cool question. Firstly, I'll give you two suggestions. The first one I'd suggest is you need to get either a psychologist or a mental skills trainer, call it a coach if you want, whatever, but somebody who refers to themselves as a mental skills, whatever, or a psychologist, and they need to focus on performance improvement. Let me just quickly gravitate for a second. Most psychologists focus on reducing problems, reducing mental illness symptoms, etc. A second group of psychologists focus on preventing those kinds of problems. But not many psychologists do what I do, focus at the other end of performance improvement with people who are already doing quite well. And so that's important. You've got to get the right kind of person to help you with this. But the other thing that I would say is, and I should point out, I mean, let me just explain one bit more why that's important. Okay. I can teach a business consultant very easily something like POT, which is a technique you can use to help with mental toughness. But a business consultant doesn't have the psychology background to be able to help a person actually not only put the POT into place, but more importantly, make it part of their life. So let me explain. POT stands for P-O-T. POT stands for perfectionism and overthinking. Now, anybody listening to this can do it. You do not want to do POT. You do not want the P and you do not want the OT. You do not want to be perfect. Yeah, it sounds like a really nice thing. It sounds like a good thing. But the reality is perfectionism leads to anxiety, procrastination, and eventually to decreased mental toughness. And likewise, overthinking. We would all do so much better in life if we reduce the amount of thinking we do. So now let me just finish off what I was saying earlier about a business consultant versus a psychologist, or a business consultant versus a mental skills trainer. The mental skills trainer and the business consultant can both teach people, coach people this information. The only difference, and that's why it's really worth getting the right person, is that the psychologist will have done something like 600, 2,000 hours worth of learning, something like motivational interviewing, cognitive behavior therapy, and things like the transferential model of behavior change with the PCPAM, the pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance stages, etc. And so those kinds of people can help their clients put into place POT in a much more effective way.
Thanks for sharing. And I think it flows right in for me to ask you, how can an employer increase concentration in the workforce then?
Okay, once again, cool question. Same sort of answers. Firstly, you really do want to get the right people training you. If you're going to put in the time, the money, this is a lot of money for the venue, for the food and everything else. So get the right person. Get yourself somebody who's all about performance improvement. All right, so that's the first thing. The other thing is you can use something that I call TRIPE. It's an acronym that stands for 5 very effective ways to improve concentration. TRIPE. T stands for turn concentration on and off. R is a more long-term thing that you have to do day after day after day, which is regular meditation. I is to ignore irrelevant things, irrelevant stimuli. P, positive, positive, positive. And finally, E, which is the easiest one for anybody to not only implement, but teach other people, coach other people. And E is all about controlling your environment. So, for instance, we are talking about people both in the workforce, at work, and in the workforce at home. So if you are at workforce, we're talking about controlling your office, your desk, the walls in your office, etc. And it's all about what you see is what you probably think about. And what you think about is what you probably end up doing and becoming. So at home, if you're working from home, same thing. If you have on your desk only the things that are really important, you're more likely to focus on those and not be distracted. Likewise, even if you're at work where you are probably limited as to how much things you can bring that are not work related, there are still clever techniques you can do. For instance, so many people get caught up with emails at work, and they're constantly looking at their emails, when a better strategy would be to have certain times of the day when you look at your emails, unless it's coming from a certain person like your boss, etc. And so having passwords that are like, please do not check me now, is a really cool thing to do. Likewise, your homepage should be either your business homepage or something very bland that does not cause you to get excited by that article, and then you go click it and you have to spend 10 minutes wasting your time when you should have been doing something else. Likewise, let's just talk about away from work just for a second. Everybody lives somewhere, and it's the same thing there. What we find is the vast majority of people end up hoarding a whole lot of things that they don't end up using. And so using the same E and TRIPE principle, what you can do is remove 5% of all your things and throw them away. We end up collecting so much stuff that we don't need.
Thank you, Adrian. Yeah, so Adrian, for the rest of the interview, let's kind of zero in on mental toughness. How do we include it into current employee learning and development programs or training programs?
Okay, nice question. It really depends on the organization you're working with. If you are working with an organization that has some rather cluey, well-educated, progressive type managers, then you can do a whole lot of really cool things. Let me give you some examples I've worked with. I've worked with companies like Xerox Services, a really, really professional organization. It's a 5-star hotel chain called the Mandarin Oriental. Now, with organizations like that, I have gone in and I have maybe done 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, etc. with these organizations, and they understand that if their staff are not mentally switched on, they won't do as well. And so I've gone in and I've done some really nice things with them. And they're the kinds of organizations, because I've been there before, they could take it upon and go the next step. They could set up a truly comprehensive, intense mental skills training program that became, if you like part of their curriculum, if you like, that they would do year after year after year after year. Not all organizations are quite like that. However, what you can do is, I can think of an insurance brokers limited that I worked with once, and I went in and I did 1 to 2 weeks of training with them. And then they didn't want to keep doing every year more training, but what they did do is on their annual retreats, what they did was they did some of the exercises that I had taught them and some of the techniques that I had taught them. Now, not all organizations, unfortunately, are quite as, the managers are not quite into this as much. They don't quite understand the real financial benefits that you can gain by doing this. And so if you can get them to do it at least once a year, that's a start. But, you know, the reality is there are many, sadly, many managers who are just not open to the possibility that this could be really beneficial. And so I think the reality is, if we really want to have a better planet and a better workforce, then yes, we could wait around for organizations like Nike to do really cool things like give their head office a whole week to get over some of the issues they've been having with COVID, but it's not likely to happen. We need to push the ball at the university level. And so I just want you to imagine that every single business student doing a bachelor's degree did maybe 3 or 4 hours worth of training on mental skills. And then let's imagine that you then get into an MBA program where you have to do 5 full-day mental skills training. So what you might end up with is 8 hours a day times 5 days. That's 40 hours. And on top of that, imagine that you have to create 1 or 2 assignments, all looking at the research with regard to mental skills. So by the time you've not only graduated, but you're now into the workforce. And if you see a document that says you have to do 5 days of mental skills training every year, you're not going to blink an eye. It will make perfect sense to you because you've already done such training. You've seen the benefits. It's made your life better. And on top of that, you've done some research. You've looked at the research and you've seen how efficacious, how effective it really is.
All right. And the last bit you said, how effective it really is. So how do we then regularly evaluate and monitor mental toughness training or performance?
Well, that is a really important question. And the answer to that is quite tricky, to be honest. So let's just try and keep it as simple as possible. For anybody listening to this thinking, well, you know, my personal private beliefs about my emotions, about my thinking, my personality, they're my own business. Those kinds of people might like to think about how a World Health Organization report estimates that 25% of all people on this planet worldwide are going to have either a mental or behavioral disorder. Maybe not a diagnosis, but if they were with a professional, they would be given such a diagnosis. 25%. What that means is right now in big organizations, they are going to have many staff that actually are performing like that. Let's take athletes. Let's take university aged athletes. They're only between 18 and 23. They haven't lived a long time. And yet 18% of university aged athletes have either already experienced either a mental or behavioral issue. And you think about it, the research is very clear that if you exercise and or play sport, then what actually happens is your mental state, it gets better. And yet 18% of them have had a mental or behavioral disorder before they've even got past 23 years of age. So let's take a live example that probably everybody here listening knows about right now. The Japanese tennis player, Naomi Osaka. And Naomi has had a tough time in the last month or so. She's had a few public meltdowns, both on the court and in front of the media. And if the people around her had been privy to what her happiness levels were, what her mental toughness levels were, and especially her depression levels, they may have been able to do something about it or get somebody else to do something about it. The problem, of course, is that in the workplace, there's a number of really difficult things to overcome. One of them is not many managers have the psychology training to really know what scores in a psychological test really mean. Another problem is that employees are not really going to want to say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how they're thinking and feeling if it's a little bit negative, and especially if they think that it's going to have an impact on their job promotion. So you've got to be a little bit clever about this. And there are ways to get around this. One of the ways to get around this is, let's imagine you're working with a pretty cool organization, say the Mandarin Oriental. And let's just imagine that you've now created a comprehensive mental skills training program, and people have to go there 3 times a year. So they go, maybe one person goes in January, May, and then say October. In January, maybe 20 minutes of the course could be focused on doing some questionnaires, such as mental toughness questionnaires, happiness questionnaires, etc. Then you can they can work out, with the help of the psychologist, the trainer, what their scores mean privately, and nobody else knows. Then when they come to the May training 4 months later, they can retest themselves, and nobody knows their score, so there's no reason for them to need to lie to themselves. And if they realize there's an area that they're a little bit weak in, well, then they can do some training or some reading accordingly.
Thank you. So, would it help if there was a competency framework, or is a competency framework even possible for mental skills?
Now you get into a really tricky area. I mean, the reality is, yes, it can be done. And in fact, it has to be done, because if it's not done, what you're going to find is many managers saying, well, if it can't be measured, it's not worth training. So it has to be, the answer has to be yes. And the answer is yes in an honest way. You just got to be clever about this. Most employees work in teams. And so what you can do is you can do team means. All right. So how do you do it? Well, it's a bit tricky with the pandemic, but depending on what country you're in. But in countries where you can get everybody together into the same room, then what you can do is you can ahead of time tell people you are going to come in on whatever day and you're going to fill out some questionnaires, but nobody will see your answers except for one person who's not employed by our company. We're going to bring in an outsider. So somebody like myself. So all the employees for that one team come into the room. Somebody like me hands out the questionnaires. They fill them out. There's no names provided. I then pick up all the pages, and in front of the employees, I work out the answers, which does not take long, and I calculate a team mean and a team standard deviation. And then, just as importantly, so that everybody feels comfortable about this, is I then have a shredding machine and I shred all the answers. And then everybody knows that Adrian will take away those shredded pieces of paper and he will burn them, etc., etc. So if everybody sees me do that, they feel more comfortable to be honest. And then you can have a team mean and a team standard deviation, which you can then look at which are the strengths and which are the weaknesses of the team. So we talked before how mental toughness has 4 components. There might be at the team level one of those 4 components that it's a bit low. And then the team can decide, do we need some training in that? Should we do some reading and learning about this? And then in the next set of mental skills training, 4 months later or 6 months or whatever, they can retest as a group. So yes, there are ways to get around this, but you've got to be clever.
Okay, so what mental toughness training would you recommend in the workforce? And would it be similar to like an annual compliance training, meaning, would you have to do mental training for people and regularly update themselves on the training?
Okay, well, that reminds me of 2016. Let me explain. I spent 10 years as a university student. I obtained 4 university qualifications, and then I was a psychology researcher for 13 years. Obtained 3 extra qualifications at the same time, and then in 2005, I went to New York and I opened up my own business. It was a psychology business or mental skills training business, call it what you want. And I donated my time in many places, and I worked for many organizations, things like psychiatric hospitals and businesses, government departments, you name it, I was there. And then after over a decade of doing that, it was 2016, and I sat in a hotel room for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 21 weeks. And what I did was I looked at exactly the kind of question you just have asked me. I put all my information together, went through it all, looking at all the research, most up-to-date research, to look at how to improve performance via psychology. And what became glaringly obvious to me was that there are 2 things that have a massive impact on whether somebody performs well or not. Mental toughness combined with happiness. It's one thing to be mentally tough, but it's a totally different thing to be mentally tough and happy. If you're not happy, but you're mentally tough, you're not going to perform as well. And so what I then did was then I put all the information together and I created some courses. And that's one of the things that I'd say is that obviously you need to, when you hire somebody who's already created a course, because it takes an enormous amount of time. So in my case, I have a number of things. I have a 66-session mental skills training program that has 14,258 PowerPoint slides. Get your head around that one. Anyhow, on top of that, I have 6 2-day courses and 1 one-day course, all about mental skills and training. So some of them are on change, some of them are on values and goals, etc., etc., etc. And so it really depends on who you're working with as to what you're going to do. And it really helps to have a variety of things that you can offer. So in my case, I have the 66 sessions, I have the 6 courses that are 2 days, I have one day. And so businesses can pick and choose what they want to do. But there's another extra important part that we really should quickly talk about. And that is, do you do the training one-on-one or do you do it on groups? Now, I've had the luxury of working in 29 countries, I think you told me, 136 organizations. I've had a lot of chance to try out things, see what works and what doesn't. And what I have learned is the following. Senior management don't really like being involved in group sessions with subordinates and other employees. They're comfortable enough in small groups of their own level, but they don't really like to talk about psychology and personality type things in front of their juniors. So, and the other problem you have is always people saying money, money, money. It's going to cost too much to train everybody one-on-one. So what I have found is a nice compromise is to, with the rank and file and middle management, we tend to do group sessions, and there's somewhere between 20 and 50 people in the room. I have done as much as 200 people in the room, and it's not a good idea. But I find somewhere between 20 and 40 is the ideal sort of number. 30 is great. And that's with the rank and file middle management. Then with the senior management, there's 2 things that work with them. Either do one-on-one sessions for an hour, usually 5 days a week for a couple of weeks, which gives you 10 one-on-one sessions. And what you find then is by the end of 10 sessions, you and the client have got to know each other quite well. I have reduced the barriers they have about talking about psychology, that scary thing, and they're now really willing to train, especially in week 2. And that works really well. But the other thing they like to do is actually they quite like doing group sessions with only their other senior managers, as long as the group's not too big. So let me give you an example. When I was with the Mandarin Oriental with with the Macau group, what I did there was I did for the first 2 weeks with 8 separate people, I did one-on-one sessions for an hour, and it went superbly. And then at the end of that, they'd all done 10 sessions. So that in the 3rd week, we did a 2-day course from 9 to 5, both days, on things like values and goals. And it once again, it went really well because by the time they had done 2 weeks with me, intense one-on-one, they felt comfortable enough with me. So they went into the room, and even though there were about 6 people who had not done that training, those other people had heard from the ones who'd done the training, and so they all felt comfortable. And so that went really well as well. And then what they also did was they brought in some of their rank and file and middle management to do, say, 1-day courses on that 3rd week. And then it was also, they brought some people from a different part of their organization over for a day, and we did things with them. So being flexible, being clever, creative really helps.
Thank you. Okay. I guess we're coming to the end of the video. I have one final question. What one quick advice would you give senior managers interested in what you have suggested, but unsure how to implement some of your suggestions?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot there, aren't you? Okay. I'll be courageous and say the following. Senior managers, be courageous. Think of Michael Jackson. What does Michael Jackson sing? Well, what he used to sing. If you want to change the world, take a look at yourself and make the change. In other words, as a senior manager, get a mental toughness questionnaire, complete it, work out which of the 4 dimensions you are weakest in, and then do something about that. Read a book, answer some questions from the book about that, or do a course on mental toughness. Improve yourself. You've got to bear in mind, we are all mentors, and senior managers or any manager tends to be a mentor for more people. And the really nice thing about this strategy is as our own mental toughness goes up, your employees and the people around you, even family members, will notice. They won't know why, but they'll notice there's something different about you. There's something slightly better about you. And so what will basically happen is as your mental toughness goes up, your ability to handle life and work will go up. But here's the final nice thing to finish on. What will also happen is you'll enjoy life more.
Thank you for sharing. And that was Adrian McInman. And this was another episode of Open Tech Convo. Until next time, I bid you see you soon.